All right, Black Box Radio. We in that raw short again. We have Mr. Leslie Vass, the first Maryland exoneree in the history, Black exoneree. Am I right, Mr. Vass?
Right.
Or the first exoneree across the board?
Yeah.
Black or white?
So from what I've been seeing of the dates that they have for the National Registry, mine is the first case. It was before the National Registry in '89.
In '89. Okay.
Yeah, they started the registry in 1989. The National Registry was established then, and they started taking the count of exonerees at that time. Prior to that, there was no count. And my case shows was one of the first ones.
Okay.
Can we take a second and define what that means for people who might not know?
What was your case?
What? Yes. No. Well, what is an exoneree? Like, what is it? What is an exoneree? What does that mean?
The classification that they're using for exoneree is an individual who has been wrongfully convicted of a crime and in prison with a sentence and served a sentence of confinement before it was conclusively proven that they had been convicted in error. That means that the state, the governor, and the court system has determined that that person was wrongfully in prison.
So, Brother Leslie, kind of tell the people where you are at this point, since we know you're the first exoneree in Maryland. What year was that?
1975. I was arrested and convicted. I was actually granted a full unconditional pardon, making it conclusively proven that I had been convicted in error in 1986.
1986. Okay. So we're in 2020.
That is the actual date. That's the actual date that they used for my exoneration. 1986.
Okay. 1986. Okay. And so now we're in 2020. So in your life, how do you feel at this point in your life, how your life has been since exoneration? How are your feelings? Because we're going to actually delve into it, but how do you actually feel in totality?
Well, right now I'm dealing with some issues in relation to this case that I never thought at this particular point in my life that I would be actually having to face. I'm 62 years of age. I've raised 4 children. I have a total of 9 children. They are all grown. They've moved on. I'm a grandparent, and I was looking to be retired and having the opportunities to have a life and do as other people do normal life as retirees. I never would expected or thought that I would be still being tied up with a criminal conviction from a wrongful case when I was 17 years old and in high school.
Wow. So you almost feel as if you've been stagnant dealing with this. Every time you make a movement.
Every turn, it seemed like every turn that I've made in my life, something has come up in regards to that case. And I can't understand what it is, they say the sins of the fathers be on the children, You stop and you try to figure out and rationalize what has actually happened that caused it seem like just you are selected to be dealing with the circumstances that you're dealing with. And maybe from it can help someone else not have to face what I've faced for the period of time that it has been.
Okay. So let's delve into the beginning. Okay, so this actually happened when, and you go from there.
I was 17 and I lived in the Westport community. Everybody in Baltimore is probably familiar with Westport, Cherry HiLL, These were the lower, what they called the inner city communities, the lower income properties and stuff. I was raised by my mother. I had two brothers. My brother under me, Craig, is like 8 years younger than me. My brother Jeffrey, who, rest his soul, he passed, but he was 9 years younger than me. And they were my little brothers. We lived in a house on Kent Street out in Westport, and I was raised in a manner like, you know, my mom's was a woman that came from Henderson, North Carolina. She was old school. You do what I tell you to do, and ain't no beyond that, right? And that's what I did. I was a kid. I enjoyed playing with my neighborhood friends. As I grew, we developed relationships, closer bonds, and so forth, because at that particular time, that's how it was there in that community, you know? Everybody knew everybody else, family. Sometimes you go stay at somebody's house overnight and those kind of things, you know? I went to Westport Elementary School. While attending Westport Elementary School, the first time I ever ran into an issue was with a teacher named Mr. Wall. And he had a tendency of trying to hit the students with paddles, right? And it was something that happened, and he blamed me for being involved in it, and I told him I didn't. And he wanted to beat me with a paddle and told me to bend over this desk. And I refused to. There was an aide that worked in the school that actually was a friend of my mother's, and she held me so that man could hit me. And that made me feel and realize the difference in how we were treated versus the other kids that came from the other side of the bridge, right? You know, but it was an experience that I moved beyond. I felt like I started learning and understanding a little better how life was when it concerned the difference in us as Black people versus white people. But I never had any kind of interaction with polices, the criminal justice system, or any of that. I ended up moving from Baltimore to Brooklyn, New York, and Bed-Stuy projects with my godmother. And I actually stayed there with her, and during the summer times would return to Maryland and spend time with my mom, because it was friction going on because of some things that had happened in the past with her and my father, I guess, right? So I was in I was in New York playing ball in school and stuff. I had god sisters that still live in Brooklyn, and all, we stay in contact. But I came back to Maryland, I remember in 1972. And when I came back, I was staying with my mom still in Westport, and I was attending, it was a school up on Gwynn Falls. It was a middle school, a junior high school at the time. It's now a church. The last time I came there, it's a church now. And I attended Gwynn Falls Junior High. That's what it was then. It wasn't middle school. They used to call it junior high. Okay. And during that time, I was playing basketball in junior high school, and was starting to make a somewhat name for myself in the community of sports, right? Playing basketball. They had just started the BNBL neighborhood league, where each community was playing the different communities in Baltimore. So I continued to gain a little more recognition playing ball. I was tall for my age, but I was small. I was skinny. I was a skinny kid, right? But I could jump and I could play ball. I went from Gwynn Falls Junior High to Southern High School in South Baltimore, which was closer to where I lived at in Westport. And at that time, my grandfather, he lived on South Hanover Street and Cross Street. That was the cross street between his home, right? And I used to go see him, go play ball. When I was attending school, I would stop and see how he was doing. And I actually got a job working in Muley's Bakery right there by Cross Street Market as a baker in the evening. And I was working, I was going to school, playing ball, doing what normal kids do, what we do in the neighborhood. You know, it wasn't no stealing cars and breaking into people's houses. Kids at that time wasn't concerned about those type of things. Not the ones that I dealt with, the ones that I was involved with, right? And even though we were given a label because of us living in those communities, those lower income communities, you know, there was respect among everybody that was there in the neighborhoods. Families respected each other and looked out for one another, you know. I remember I was at home, my mom said, Leslie, go to the store and get me a newspaper. And I said, okay. It was February 15th, 1975. I walked over to Westport Pharmacy on Annapolis Road from my house, entered through the back door, which is the liquor department, to walk through, to cut through to the front of the store. And as I went in, Mr. Clarence McClure and a man named Mr. Willie Adams were workers that I knew from the community. I've been living there 10 years. I known these people. These people watched me grow up and come in the store as a kid and all that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to them, and Mr. Clarence, he used to bet on the basketball games. He asked me, how many points you gonna give him this week, Leslie? You know, those kind of things. And I was talking, we laughed and joked, and I went up to the front, and I seen the man that owned the store. We call him Doc. That's all I've ever known him as was Doc. I explained to him, I need a paper, Doc. You got any papers back there? You know, and he was like, Leslie, ain't no papers here. Look out on the front by the desk, right? And when I got up to the front, the lady said, okay, well, here's the paper. She saw me the paper. And I go outside. I'm waiting in front of the store to cross the street to walk back towards my home. When I hear somebody say, you, turn around, get up against the wall. Now it's like three other people, it's three of us standing at the curb. The voice is behind me, and when I turn, I see a police officer, and he's pointing at us at the corner. And I'm just like, you know, I don't know. I know he's not talking to me because I just come out the store. So I stepped down off the curb to cross the street. And he said, no, get up against the wall. Walk and put your hands up against the wall. And he had his gun out. He walked up to me, and now I'm asking what's going on. He put the gun to the back of my head, told me, face the wall, don't move. And I'm asking him, what's happening? What's going on? And he's saying, you know, shut up. Then I hear him say, is this the man? And I hear a voice, but I can't turn my head because he got this gun to my head. You know, I mean, I'm petrified, to be honest with you. You know, as I think back to that particular time, you know, it really, how was being treated and didn't understand what was going on. I just got a newspaper, come out the store, and then he's saying, you under arrest. And I said, under arrest for what? And he said, for robbing the store. I said, robbing the store? I just come out the store. He said, that's what you robbed and you're under arrest. And he was saying something about he was calling for a wagon and all this. And all these things he was saying, I'm trying to explain to him, take me in the store and Doc can verify I didn't rob him. And he said, tell it to the judge and all this kind of stuff. I remember being transported from right there in the pad, they call it paddy wagon during that time, to Southern Police Station over there off of Charles Street. I remember when they took me in, and this guy said, the police officer said, "What's your name?" I told him my name. Then he said, "Your date of birth." And I told him September the 7th, 1957. So he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 17, sir." He said, "Hey, Sarge, we got a juvenile back here." You know, like that. And the reason why I remember it so clearly is because this is something I never experienced, something that, you know, to this day, I have visions sometime about this, about what I've dealt with, how this thing has been on, and how it happened, you know? So they put me in a cell. I stayed in the cell by myself for, I know, at least about 5 hours, 6 hours. Then when they carried me, the guy came and got me and said, "You're going before the commissioner." And he said, I said, "Well, they're gonna release me?" I said, "I need to call my mom." And he was like, "You know, your family is here, you know," and so forth. And as they had me standing at by this desk, and I could see in the window of the little court area, right? I see my mom's, I see her friend with her, I see the lady live next door to me, the lady we call Miss Mick, like an aunt to me, right? And they take me in. And I'm trying to tell my mom, I don't know what's going on. And she's saying, "Wait a minute, hold on. It's gonna be okay." And I'm just like shocked because I don't know what these people talking about. Robbing somebody, and then how I go from buying a newspaper to being arrested for robbing something, you know? So I remember the judge, the court commissioner saying, he was explaining to me I was charged with armed robbery, use of a handgun in a robbery. And I said, "I ain't have no gun. They took a newspaper off me." You know, what gun? You know? So he's saying, "Well, you know, you got to get a lawyer and so forth." Then he told me, "You're a juvenile with no prior criminal history. We're going to release you into the custody of your mother. The conditions are you do not go back to the store. If you go there, we're going to have you arrested. You do not talk to the workers or anybody that works at the store. You stay away from the store and anybody that works there. If not, we're going to come and arrest you." That stuck in my mind. That most definitely stuck in my mind. And I couldn't see how somebody could be put in a cell like I was put in and actually remain there. Not at the mindset that I had at that time. That was February 15th, 1975.
Okay, so how much time transpired between the time that you were released into your mother's custody and when you were
when I went to trial?
Yes.
From February the 15th, 1975, the next time I appeared in court was July 2nd, 1975.
So briefly, can you talk a little bit about what happened during that time in between?
In between then, the first time she had called me to meet this attorney by the name of Robert Paul Conrad. And when she introduced me to him, she told me he was my lawyer. Do whatever he told me to do. Don't question him, you know, because he's the attorney. He's learned that law. He knows what he's doing. She's paying her hard-earned money to him. Listen to what he say. Okay. The second time I met with him, the first thing he asked me was, "Did your mother send me an envelope or a check or something?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, excuse me." I gave him the envelope that she had given me to give to him. And he said to me, he said, "Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. You continue doing what you're doing, and I'll see you when we go to court." That was it. I asked him, I said, "Sir," I said, "they said I robbed the drugstore." I said, "I don't know anything about that." I said, you know, and he said, "Don't worry about it." It was like You don't want to talk about it. You don't tell me nothing about it. And whatever I had to say, he didn't want to hear. He was the attorney. You do what the lawyers say. That's my focus, you know? And the next time that I actually appeared was July the 2nd. I only seen him them 2 times. And that's how our meeting went. That's exactly how they went, okay?
Okay, so we at July 2nd now? You're at the date of your trial?
The date of my trial, July the 2nd. I appears at the, it was then called the Supreme Bench for Baltimore City on Calvert Street. That's the side that I remember I went in. While outside waiting for the doors to be open, I could see Mr. Clarence and them. When we get inside the building and get upstairs, he sees me. Mr. Clarence was the driver at the Westport Pharmacy where I was arrested at, outside of. He's also the person that I knew that worked there. Him and Mr. Willie Adams, both were there at the courthouse. So it was another man standing with them, but I didn't know him. This fella had on a red plaid like lumberjack shirt at the time, right? And when Mr. Klein saw me, he was like, Leslie, what you doing down here? I know you ain't in no trouble, because he knew me as a kid that played basketball. Wasn't about no running around getting in no conflict where I end up in no courthouse or nothing. So he, you know, and I wouldn't say nothing at first, right? Because I was terrified that somebody would see me talking to him and they would talk about arresting me. That's something that stayed in my mind about that. Right?
Had you turned 18 in the interim time? Or
I didn't turn 18 until I was in the Maryland State Penitentiary.
Okay.
My birthday, September the 7th. That was July the 2nd of 75. I remember Mr. Klein said, you know, what's wrong with you? And I bust out crying, man, you know, because I was scared. And I said to him, I said, they told me not to talk to you or they was going to arrest me again. And he said, he was looking like, him and Mr. Willie was looking at me like, what's wrong with this kid? You know? And he said, Leslie, he said, they arrested you for the drugstore? So I said, yeah. And he said, oh my God. And him and Mr. Willie looked at this, he said, come on. He said, let me take you over here and talk to this man. And they walked me over to this white man that had a folder. I never forget, he had this folder and the guy with the plaid shirt on was standing there saying something to him. And when they walked me to him, he stopped talking, right? And Mr. Clancy told that guy that ended up, the white guy with the folder ended up being the state prosecutor. They said, y'all locked this kid up for robbing this man. He didn't have anything to do with this. We know him. We know this kid. And Mr. Willie Adams was saying the same thing to this white guy. So he said to them, I remember him saying to them, well, we don't need your testimony. He said, well, we seen the people and followed them and wrote the car tag number down and gave it to the police that the other 2 men was arrested on. He said, you know, that's kid, this kid didn't have nothing to do with this. Y'all mistaken. So he said, I'm not using it, I'll dismiss. Leave the courthouse like that. So Mr. Willie and Mr. Clarence looked at each other and he said to me, he said, Leslie, do you have an attorney? You got a public defender or somebody that's representing you? So I said, yeah. I said, but he's not here. And I started looking around for him, right? And we were standing on the 2nd floor of the courthouse in front of courtroom 200. I never forget everything about that, all of that. And I happened to look and see him coming up the steps. And I said to him, I said, there he go now, coming up. But when he comes up, I call him Mr. Conrad. He said, wait a minute. and he walks to the white guy. Him and the white guy start talking.
And that's
right?
the state's, the
state attorney, the
okay.
state prosecutor.
So your attorney and the state's attorney started talking.
My attorney came up the steps, and when I said, Mr. Conrad, he said, wait a minute, and he went over to the white guy, which was the state prosecutor that had the folder, and he was talking to them. Then he looked over at me. Then they kept on talking. Then he came over. When he came over, Mr. Willie Adams and Mr. Clarence McCurry was trying to tell him, and he said, I can't talk to y'all because you're state witnesses. He said, and I told you, talking to me, I told you don't talk to nobody. What are you doing? You do what I tell you do. And he was talking to me like he was upset with me, like he had an attitude. And I'm saying, well, these men know that they know me. They know I didn't rob the drugstore. He said, you don't know. He said, the drugstore was robbed November the 2nd. He said, and I said, what about November? And he said, well, did you ever see, he said, Leslie, when you was arrested, the man identified you. I said, what man? What are you talking about? I said, they said I robbed the drugstore. They ain't said no man. They said the drugstore. He said, well, the man works in the drugstore. I said, Mr. Clarence? Mr. Willard? He said, no. And Mr. Clarence then was explaining that he was trying to tell me that it was a dude that worked part-time there. I didn't know this man. I never seen him before because he only worked one day on the weekend. And that was on a Saturday. I, during the weekends, stayed at my grandfather's house because when we had basketball practice for the Southern Bulldogs, that school, I stayed at his house because it was right there by my job. And I could go right to my job. From when we finished practice, I would go to the bakery. From the bakery, I would come home to my grandfather's house, right? That's only on the weekends. I very rarely, stayed in Westport during them times and stuff. So, but they opened the doors. I remember them opening the doors to the courtroom 200. So when we go in, I go in, and people was taking seats and stuff. I thought I sat like maybe the third row on one of them long bench seats in courtroom 200 from the door. And the guy with the folder, the white guy, I didn't even realize they had sat behind me because Mr. Clarence was trying to talk to me, and I'm trying to explain, I don't know what's going on. They asking me, where's my mother? And I asked him, I said, well, my mother had went with the attorney, went to the attorney's office, I guess to square out her bill or whatever, And he said, well, I told your mother, don't worry about it, and that she could go home, that you will be okay, and all that. So I said, and he said, Leslie, he said, I told you, don't talk to nobody about your case. If the judge finds out, he can revoke your bail and have you locked up again. You don't want that, do you? No, I don't want that, right? So I said, this man that's supposed to have been robbed, who is he? Because I've never seen this man. He said, when you was arrested, you didn't hear, the police didn't show you to a man? I said, I didn't see no man. I said, when they arrested me, they made me face the wall and put the gun to my head, right? And I was scared to move. He said, well, this man, suppose he said, you came in the store, he identified you. And I'm listening, I'm saying, what are you talking about, man? So he said, it's the man that's sitting behind you with the red plaid shirt on, besides the white guy. And when I turned, the man had the folder, the vanilla folder open, and my picture with my bush and the arrest picture was there on the inside of that thing, and the guy and him and they was back there looking at the picture. So I said, that man, excuse me. I said, that man was in the hallway looking at me. I don't know him. I've never seen him before. Mr. Conrad got up and the guy got up and they went to the side and was talking and stuff. So I seen the white guy walk up toward the clerk of the court and say something to him, and then they started calling the cases. My case was like the third case they called. And when they called me, the first two cases they dismissed. When they called me, I had to get up and walk up to the desk, to the defense table. And when I got there, I'm scared to death because I'm thinking that this judge gonna tell me they're gonna lock me up again for talking to Mr. Klein, you know. But they started talking about how that I want to plead, and I plead not guilty. Then they asked me what kind of trial did I want, and he had told me when they asked me that question to say trial by jury. No, trial by judge. But my mom was telling me what my mom had said, that I supposed to have a trial by jury. So inadvertently, when they asked me, I said trial by jury. And then he said, no, trial by judge. I said, oh, I'm sorry, trial by judge. Trial by judge. And he said, well, okay, we'll start the trial now. And I'm like, you know, okay, now there's some other stuff I don't know nothing about, but you know, this man, they say the guy with the folder, which was the prosecutor, I remember him saying, Your Honor, something about sequestering the witness. So the judge said he granted it, and they told the guy whose name is Chester, Joseph Frederick Chester, which was the victim. They said to him, you got to leave out the courtroom. Now, when they told me to go sit anywhere in the courtroom, and he was supposed to come in and make an identification, right? Now, you know, I didn't know, I was, when I say illiterate to the law, illiterate, dumb, unaware, unknowledgeable, all of it. I didn't have an inkling or an idea of what was going on. You know, when I think about what happened in the courtroom and the way my conviction happened, I don't say that I was convicted. I know I was railroaded.
Wow, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you something, Brother Leslie. So yeah. Your attorney had a meeting with your mother. Am I correct? That same day, your mother and him went and talked.
Yeah, that day he met with my mother.
That same day, when your mother was there to be with you, and he had to talk to her. Right. Robert, so there's Mr. Conrad, Mr. Robert Paul Conrad had a little side meeting with your mother. Came back to you and told you that you were going to be all right and that she could go home.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, and you are a 17-year-old minor.
17-year-old. Yeah, okay. I know. I understand.
Okay, so I'm trying to lay the details out. So you're 17-year-old.
How do you think I feel thinking back about what happened?
And then
knowing what I know now, knowing what I learned now about the judicial system and how it should have been. You know what I'm saying?
We're gonna lay that out. So, but we want to stay. I know it's a lot of emotion for you, and I know, but we want to lay it out for other people. I'm so sorry that what you're going through, but let's lay it out, okay? So you're a 17-year-old young man in a courtroom with lawyers, a judge, and the whole penal system or whatever they do there. Yeah. And he tells you to say judge, but you automatically say jury.
Right.
Trial by jury, right?
Right.
Okay. You automatically say that because that's in your mindset, that's what you wanted. And your mother told you.
That's what my mom had told me I supposed to have had.
Got it.
You know,
got it.
I remember them calling him back in. And when he got on the stand, they asked him to explain what happened November the 2nd, 1974.
Okay, who's him?
His name is Joseph Frederick Chester, who
Okay,
was
so
the victim.
he came back in the courtroom?
Yeah, they called him back in the courtroom. What had happened was when they told him to be sequestered, they sent him out of the courtroom. They told him to step out. And he left out the courtroom and went in the hallway. Then when they told me to go sit anywhere in the courtroom, right? And I go sit on where I was at.
Were there other people in the courtroom? Were there other people in the courtroom?
There was other people in the courtroom, but it wasn't that many.
Okay.
It wasn't that many, you know. But I remember I went and sat where I was sitting at, and then I remember the judge told the sheriff to let him in, and he came in. He walked right past. He looked right at me. I'm looking at him. He looked right at me, walked past me, went up and then went up on the stand, and they asked him to describe what happened November the 2nd, 1974. When they said a date, I'm sitting there looking at this man, and I'm saying to myself, November, what are they talking about, November? I was arrested February the 15th, 1975. That's almost 4 months, you know? So what are they talking about this November? So then I hear him start explaining that he was robbed by 3 men. He was making a delivery. And he in Cherry HiLL on 2707 Spelman Road, some apartment. I forget the apartment number. I think it was B or some stuff like that, right? And I remember him saying that he walked past 3 men when he was walking up the walkway to deliver an order of liquor to this apartment. And when he knocked on the door, the lady told him she didn't order no liquor. He turned around to come down the steps, come out the building. The 3 men were still standing there. He said one of the men stepped up to him and told him to give him what he had on him. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, the other guy that's supposed to have been me, the tall one, that's supposed to have took a handgun and put it, he didn't say I put it, he said I put it to the side and took $120 out of his shirt pocket, right? He said they told him to get in his car and drive away. He said, which he did. He said he went to the gas station at Cherry HiLL and Waterview so that he could use the phone to call the police to report the robbery. They asked him, did he see the man in court that robbed him? The one that's supposed to took the money out of his shirt pocket. He said, yeah. So they said, well, will you go stand next to him? Or would you go where he's at and stand next to him? So he came down off the stand, walked down the aisle, came to the row where I was sitting and stopped right there and put his hand on the I guess that would be the column of the bench. And they asked him, they said, this is the man that took the money out your pocket. He said, I think so, he looks like him. And they said, no, sir, you have to be certain and say yes, that he is the man before we can convict him. That's what the prosecutor told him. And he said, yeah, well, that's him, like that. So they told me to come back up and at the defense table when I went there. I remember him talking about the robbery, and then I remember my attorney asking him, had he ever been robbed before? Had he ever been robbed before while making a delivery? The state objected to it, and they didn't make him answer. I remember that. I don't know why, but that's something I remember. Then the judge, they told me it was my turn to testify, and I got up and explained. They asked me about where I lived at, what school I attended and all this kind of stuff. Then I said, I don't know anything about it. I've never seen this man before. I didn't rob him. I was charged with robbing the drugstore. I said, when I was originally arrested, I was charged with robbing the drugstore, not a delivery driver, in November. I said, I was arrested February the 15th, 1975, and that's the only thing that I know. I don't know anything else about whatever happened in November. So the prosecutor, when he started questioning me, he asked me, well, where were you at November the 2nd, 1974? So I'm like, you know, I said if it was a weekend, then I was probably at my grandfather's house because that's where I stayed on the weekend. And where does he live? And why he's not here? Why he's not a witness for you? And all this kind of stuff they was asking. So I said, my lawyer, I never knew anything about any robbery. I don't know anything more to say. So I said, I didn't do this. So they was like, well, you know, the judge said, well, I find you guilty of the armed robbery of Joseph Frederick Chester for $120. And I said, guilty? Guilty of what? I don't know anything about this. You know, and I looked at this lawyer, right? And this man was laughing like it was funny. Like it was funny.
Mr. Conrad? Mr. Conrad was like,
Mr. Conrad. Yeah, that man, Mr. Conrad. You know? And I don't know why, and I don't know, you know, this is my hand of God. I cannot tell you why I said what I said to him. I said, but you did what you did, but they're gonna get this back. And I don't know what in me made me say that to him. And when they started talking about they was gonna put the handcuffs on me and all that stuff, it got to be a little scuffle and all that kind of stuff, because I wasn't going just like that, you know? And when they finally was able to get me, I guess, under control, and then down in between, behind the benches, there's a door that leads down into I call it the dungeon, right? You know, and that was my introduction into the Department of Corrections, because at that time I was in pre-trial, still waiting to be sentenced.
Okay, well let me ask a question. Let me ask a question. So Joseph Frederick Chester is the man with the lumberjack shirt that you saw.
Right.
I want to bring it together because I don't know. So he was the man with that you walked in, you saw the two men that you knew.
Right.
And a man in a lumberjack shirt. So this was a white man.
He was black.
He was black. Okay, this is a black man.
The victim was black. Mr. Chester is black. Willie Adams is black.
Okay, didn't know. Got it. So they were standing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So they were standing together when you walked up.
Right, they were standing together. They were standing together when I came up.
So the reason they were standing together, from what I'm hearing, is they knew each other because they worked together.
They worked together. They worked together.
I understand. They worked together, so that's why they were standing together.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't know that though.
I understand you didn't know, so I'm trying to make context for me who don't know neither, and the family. I want the family to understand. So this same man, they had a speedy trial with you right then.
Yeah.
With him testifying against you, and your lawyer, it sounds like you were ill prepared for anything that went on in that courtroom. He didn't inform you, and he laughed at you once you were being convicted. Am I clear? That's what happened?
Yeah. Yes, you are totally correct in everything that you're saying right now, because that's what happened. But I learned more as this went on. Okay.
Okay, we right here at 17 though. Let's stay right here at 17. And your mom was not there because they told her you was gonna be all right.
My mom was not there.
So you were there by yourself, a 17-year-old boy, fighting for your life.
Tried as an adult.
Tried as an adult.
And
Immediate
there was no pretrial motions that was held or anything, like a waiver motion or anything like that.
Nothing.
None of that was done. None of that was done. Even though I was released into the custody of my mother as a juvenile by the court commissioner, I was still charged as an adult, which was, I learned later, was a total violation of the law.
So you was charged as an adult, okay, at 17.
They put me at BaltimoreCity jail then. They put me on old section, and they give me, after they found me guilty, they gave me a $20,000 cash bail. I was at the jail. I was at BaltimoreCity jail from July the 2nd to July 18th when they brought me back to court for sentencing. I remember him saying that they ordered what they call a PSI report, which is a pre-sentence investigation report. During the time that I was at the jail, a lady came to visit me, and when she told me she was from parole and probation and all this kind of stuff, and was asking me a million questions. I kept saying, I don't know. I cannot tell you what I don't know. Certain things you ask me, I have no idea about, because these people saying about a robbery that happened in Cherry HiLL. Westport and Cherry HiLL during that particular point in time was not two communities that got along. They were rivalries. They were rivalries, just like Lexington Terrace and Pole Homes and stuff was happening. So, I'm sitting here telling this lady different things that she's asking me, and then when they take me back to court, the judge says that he got the PSI report. I asked the lawyer, well, what is that? And they tell me that's a report that the parole and probation did, and it's gonna, you might get probation and all this. I said, probation? What is probation? All these things I had to ask him about there in the courtroom sitting there before they sentenced me. Then he told me,
you're talking to Conrad again, right?
To Conrad, because he was still the counsel of record.
But you never talked to him did you talk to him while you were from July 2nd to July 18th?
He never came to see me during the time after I was found guilty.
So July 18th was your first time seeing him again after he laughed at you?
Yeah, the first time. That was the very first time I saw him again.
Okay, I want to make sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, he said to me that they might give me probation. He said, but it's a possibility I could get 20 years. And I said, 20 years? 20 years for what, sir? I said, I didn't do anything. And he said, well, you found guilty, and you just have to, whatever you have to serve your time and so forth. And I'm listening to him and looking at him. My mind is totally in turmoil. I don't know anything. You understand? I had an opportunity to talk to my mom's on the phone. She came over to visit me, and I could see that she was like going through a lot about this to happen. But when he told me that he was sentencing me to 15 years and 5 years consecutive for the handgun.
The judge said this. The judge said, you said he.
His name was Judge James A. Perrott.
James A.
Perrott. Think about God, what I learned about these people down there in BaltimoreCity Circuit Court at that time, I never knew nothing about the criminal justice system when I was there. This man sentenced me to possession of a handgun and 15 years consecutive as a first-time offender, a juvenile, for armed robbery.
15 years and 5 years consecutive.
Right, a total of 20 years.
Total of 20 years. Okay. for a
They
robbery in November 2nd that you know nothing about.
November the 2nd, 1974. I knew nothing about. Period. My hand of God. To this day, I feel like I was the dumbest person in the world. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I have
You were a
a,
child.
I have
You were
a,
a child, sir. So we gotta state that you were a child.
yeah, I have a question. Whether and I guess you can really only speculate onto what some of the motives might have been, but perhaps the reason that the attorney was advising a trial by judge versus a trial by jury had something to do with the financial means that you had available.
Let's cut this straight and clear. The man was a well-known racist.
Okay.
It was well known throughout the legal profession that Robert Paul Conrad disliked niggers. That was it. I didn't know anything about it until after I was confined and I started getting his history. He was a bar council member for the Attorney Grievance Commission. When I started learning law in the penitentiary and filed a claim against them, the director, the top person for the Attorney Grievance Commission for the state of Maryland in Crownsville, Maryland, told me point blank he didn't believe what I said about Robert Conrad. Right?
Well, who was he? Who was he? We saying
his name was Melvin Hirschman. He's retired.
Okay, Maryland, spell that.
He was Melvin Hirschman. Mel Hirschman.
Okay. And he was
the chairman of the Attorney Grievance Commission.
Okay, so you filed a grievance against Robert Paul Conrad.
Filed a grievance against the attorney, Robert Paul Conrad.
Okay.
And I filed it. Melvin Hirschman wrote me a letter back and said him and Mr. Bob, that's how he put it, him and Bob had been friends for many years, and he disbelieved me and dismissed my complaint.
Really? So you had you didn't go through a hearing? He just wrote you a letter?
I did not have a hearing. I'm gonna show you how vindictive these people are. I can show you. I filed another complaint against another attorney that held my case up for almost 3 years, a fellow by the name of William H. Murphy. They call him Billy Murphy.
Billy Murphy. Okay, so let's we're gonna go to that.
We want to stay chronological as we can.
Stay chronological.
So the reason, I just wanted to get your insights on the reasoning of that particular line of defense because it seemed highly irregular.
I understand. I know everything in my case is highly irregular. When I found out that the robbery actually happened November the 2nd, 1974 at trial, when I actually was in prison, when I got sentenced July the 18th, and they transferred me from the pre-release, which is BaltimoreCity Jail, into the Divisional Corrections, where I was assigned an inmate identification number and all that, and I became an actual prisoner of the Divisional Corrections. I learned that when I got sentenced, the correctional officer that carried me back downstairs said that it was wrong for them to try me before that judge because that judge's son had just been robbed by some black youth in Baltimore City, and everybody
and this is Judge Parrott. Wait a minute.
Judge Parrott, his son had been robbed the week before my trial was held, and everybody that came before him charged with armed robbery, the teenager, he sent to prison.
Okay. But so, all right. So we hear that's so Judge Parrott, because from what G asked was the reasoning for this swift by judge was because of the means to pay Conrad. He knew you didn't have it, so he said more or less, let's do a trial by judge. Do you think, is that what you were asking, G? Wait a minute, brother.
Yeah. I was just curious if, like, I understand that he was being exploitative of the whole time, taking advantage of your lack of knowledge of the system. It seems like he was being exploitative towards your mother. And I'm just curious to what degree your means to pay for adequate legal
my mom, even though we resided in public housing, my mom's work, she was not on social service. She didn't receive social service. My mother worked for the Board of Education, Baltimore County, as a custodian. That was her profession. She worked, and I know for a fact she worked, you know, from the time from like 3 until after 12, because she didn't get home until after that. You know what I'm saying? You
Well,
know,
more or less, we're trying to find out why would he push you towards the judge? Do you get what I'm saying? We're trying to pull out what would be the reasoning for him to be so specific about you having a child by judge. That's what we're trying to get it's for context.
Because I feel like because they all three were already announced that what they was going to do.
Okay, because they were talking to each other. The state's attorney, your attorney, they were all talking to each other. Your mother worked, but he assumed, and of course, we kind of see that they all have a relationship. We can see that him and the state's attorney have some type of relationship. You filed a grievance after this because now you're in the Division of Corrections. Right. You're actually an inmate, am I right?
I'm an inmate now, and I was transferred that same day to the Maryland State Penitentiary, right at 954 Ford Street.
And this is July 18th.
July 18th.
1975.
1975. I was transferred to the Maryland State Penitentiary. I went through the what they call classification diagnostics section, where they assign you your housing location, they make up their determination what your classification status is going to be based on your prior criminal record and all that, you know.
So at 17, you haven't even made 18 yet. You're going you haven't made 18.
I hadn't turned 18.
You're on your way into as an inmate, as a charged as an adult, and you're going to go to the Division of Corrections at 17. Wow.
I went into the Division of Correction at the age of 17. When my birthday came, when I turned 18, I was in the Maryland State Penitentiary at 954 Ford Street and A Block Cell 125, facing Ford Street. Directly above my tier section was Death Row.